Hello, Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're located in Old Montgomery, a few doors north of the Montgomery Inn, across the street from Montgomery Cyclery. We have a wonderful webpage, audibleelegance.com. We've actually been doing some revisions, so do take a look at the specials page where manufacturers are having special promotions. Also take a look at the events page because that's where we introduce new product that have come to the market. We do work on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And tonight I thought I would talk about subwoofers in an audio system. And this is, again, kind of a repeat of one I've done before, but a little different. And there are a couple questions that people commonly raise. The first one is, what crossover point should I use? And there are a couple of different ways that subwoofers can be hooked up. They can be straight hooked out from a essentially full range subwoofer output of an audio piece, or they can actually work as the crossover themselves between the main set of speakers and themselves. One thing you do not want to do at all, though, is to have a product where you can adjust the crossover point in the electronics as well as the crossover point in the subwoofer, and you use it that way. At that point, you use the LFE input because the LFE input takes the crossover, the subwoofer, out of the picture. Otherwise, you wind up creating all sorts of havoc in how things sound. Now, a subwoofer to me is not the reason for buying an audio system. I look at a subwoofer as the cherry that is put on the sundae. If you treat the subwoofer as the sundae and everything else is the cherry, well, you got everything upside down and your audio system is going to be a mess. So I'm very cautious about the deployment of subwoofers, and typically I'm setting the subwoofers very, very low in their range. So to me, even in home theater, if I can set it at 60 cycles and below, I do it. I don't like subwoofers coming up into the range that the main set of speakers are already designed to handle, particularly since the designs with drivers being vertical is to get the time alignment correct. That also relates to the subwoofer in terms of where's the subwoofer positioned. That's one where you have to listen to it because you want to make sure that its distance is consistent with the distance of the rest of your system. And you don't want to have a short distance or a long distance because, again, you're trying to watch out for time alignment. Again, that's why I typically go very deep because otherwise what you wind up with is car stereo thump therapy in your room, which is just a major detraction from the audio performance. The question about its volume setting, that's where if you can, and there are plenty of discs out there, and there are plenty of very lovely sound pressure meters. Actually, there's some companies that make software that can be used on your phone to measure sound pressure. What you want to do is have run test tones so that the volume output from the subwoofer is consistent with your main set of speakers. You don't want it louder than or softer than. You want it to be matched in what's going on with the rest of the range. And those sweep tests or lock in on particular tones and using a sound pressure meter will help you make that judgment. When you're talking about adding a subwoofer to an audio system, there is no built-in software in the audio product to mimic what's done in home theater receivers, which, by the way, personally speaking, I still do everything manually first and then compare to what their little electronic program does to the performance. And there are times when I turn that sucker off. I consider those more, training wheels so that the system doesn't sound like crap. Because a lot of people, we go to their systems, they hadn't even measured the distance to anything. We're not even talking about matched sound pressure. So that's another story. I'll get to that another day. So integrating the subwoofers. Some subwoofers, we have a golden ear subwoofer here, which we really enjoy. Um, but there are other subwoofers that actually include something known as phase angle, and that can have a very dramatic effect upon its integration and musicality to a system. I know some of the older, more recent Martin Logan ones actually allow you to look at that and adjust it, and you can listen to what happens. Others do not, so its placement becomes even more important. But don't think that you're going to put a subwoofer in some sort of void in the room and say that this is where it's going to be and it's going to work. No, it doesn't work that way. And for God's sakes, typically keep a subwoofer out of a corner, okay? Because a corner is taking the acoustical energy that's designed to work in a fairly open field and quadrupling its power because it's horn loaded in the corner. Unless you like the sound of car stereo going up and down your street, then hell, if you like one, come in and buy a second one from us. So, you know, that's generally what I look at. I've had situations where the actual placement of the subwoofer is not anywhere near the system, but is actually a bit down the wall. These are things you simply have to listen to. In trying to make that judgment musically, choose recordings with natural bass to it, bass instruments. There's some wonderful jazz recordings by Three Blind Mice that I use. And what you're listening to is that the bass notes that are produced are equal in volume and equal in presence, so to speak. And that they're all clear, as opposed to some being cleared and then something being kind of like a marshmallow being beaten on. But that's what you want to, listen for. You don't want the subwoofer to detract from the musical performance. I know the Beatles got rid of their one drummer and brought in Ringo. The question is, would the Beatles have gone anywhere without the talent of Ringo? And I rather doubt it. So yeah, bass makes a big difference to music. And there we are.